What's going on, MMA fans? This is LTrain here again. Today I'm going to continue my series on the UFC title hunt. This is video 3 of 7, and today we're going to talk about the UFC featherweight division. Okay, the kingpin at the time is Jose Aldo. He looks indestructible. He's 8-0 in the WEC, 18-1 overall. He's going to have his first UFC fight coming up at UFC 129 against Mark Hominick. The guys I see chasing him right now are, of course, Hominick, as I discussed. He's getting the next title shot. Some others are Chad Money Mendez, and another one is Diego Nunes. And two that I think can become quick contenders in that division are two guys that just dropped down from lightweight, and I'm talking about Kenny Florian and Tyson Griffin. Let's get right into it. Let's start with Mark Hominick, since that's the next title shot. He's 6-2 with Zuffa, 4-2 as a featherweight, and he's 20-8 overall. He's won his last 4 with wins over George Roop and Leonard Garcia. I like this fight because I think Hominick is the best striker that Aldo has faced so far, and it's interesting to me to see how that's going to turn out. I want to see. I think it's going to be a great fight, and I want to see how Aldo's able to stand up and fight against somebody who has maybe equal stand up with him. See how that happens. See if maybe he takes it to the ground. I hadn't seen him on the ground much, but see if maybe he's gonna fight smart. He knows that that's his best weapon is standing up, and maybe he takes it down to the ground. Hominick, of course, is no slouch on the ground, so I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out. Why I don't think Hominick is the second best fighter in the division. I think he has some interesting skills to make that a really exciting fight. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Chad Mendez. He's been looking great. Great wrestler. He's 5-0 in Zuffa. He's undefeated with a 10-0 overall record. He is probably he's probably the best wrestler in that division. He's got wins over Eric Koch, Javier Vasquez, and Michihiro Omagawa. I think that he's probably maybe looking the top runner to get the next title shot against whoever wins between Hominick and Aldo. Another guy that I think's in the chase is Diego Nunes. He's 5-1 in Zuffa, 16-1 overall, and he has wins over Mike Brown and Rafael Assunção. I've watched him fight a few times, and he looks good. I haven't watched all of his fights. I can admit that. I noticed that he goes to decision a lot, but he looks like he has an all-around game. So it's interesting to see how he does. His next fight is going to be at UFC 131 against Kenny Florian. I think he'll be the underdog in that fight, but he always seems to be the underdog in most of his fights, and he seems to pull them out a lot of the times. So it's interesting to see how Kenny Florian makes the weight cut. He is a pretty thin 155, so that's a lot of talk that I see on forums and stuff. Talking about can he really make 145, and what kind of condition will he be in when he gets down to 145 pounds. And I guess if you're going to fight him, the first fight after his cut, usually where fighters don't look that great, that would be the time to have him. So we're going to find out real quick whether Florian is going to be, be able to maintain that weight in that division, on how he looks when he fights. It's because I see a lot of guys move down and they don't look so good. So I mean, if he's able to cut the weight smart, I think he's going to be a great contender. I mean, I mean, you've seen what he's done in the lightweight division. He's been a top staple in that division for a long time. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to Kenny Florian. He's 11-4 in the UFC, 15-5 overall. You know, most of his wins have been in the lightweight division. He's been a contender in that division, fought for the title twice. And so I'm kind of interested to see how he does when he drops down. He has recent wins over Clay Guida and Takanori Gomi. I think whoever wins that fight is lining themselves up for a near, a title shot in the near future. Another guy that dropped down is Tyson Griffin. Slightly worse record. He's 7-5 in the UFC. He has wins over Clay Guida, and it's not a UFC win, but one of his wins is over former featherweight kingpin Uriah Faber, outside the UFC, of course. But the thing is, he's lost 3 out of his last 5 fights. He hasn't looked that great. Suffered a vicious TKO or knockout loss to Takanori Gomi. Lost to Nick Lentz. Of course, Nick Lentz is a real good wrestler, and he kind of controlled him a lot in that fight. So I'm kind of interested to see what I think he could be a contender in that division. I think it was the right move for him to drop down. He was losing a lot of his spunk in the lightweight division. I think it's great that he gets a new start. He's a shorter guy, but he's real muscular. So I think he's going to lose some of that muscle and some of that strength that he has by dropping down. And it's just, when anybody moves a weight class, it's always interested to see. I'm always interested to see how they make the weight cut and how they fare in their first fight. A lot of times that's their worst fight, and we'll see for Griffin and Florian. Okay, so I want to discuss some of the fights that are scheduled right now that I believe is going to shape the division over the next 5 or 6 months. Here's my rundown of the top 5 fights to look at in this division. We got Manny Gamburian and Rafael Asuncao. That's at UFC 128. Leonard Garcia versus Nam Pham 2 at UFC Fight Night 24. Jose Aldo versus Mark Hominick. That's, of course, the title fight at UFC 129. Josh Gillespie versus George Roop at Tough 13 finale. And then Kenny Florian versus Diego Nunes at UFC 131. Okay, pretty much how I see this division playing out. Right now, I got to say, before the drops, Mendez and Hominick were the only 2 guys I've seen out there that put enough wins together and were able to go right into a title fight. I think because of his style, Hominick was the one that was able to get that title shot. So those 2 fight UFC 129. I think the winner is probably gonna fight Mendez. It's a long layoff for Mendez. He fought last at UFC 126. Got the win over Omigawa. So I kind of think he'll be next in line, especially since Florian is scheduled to fight Nunes. I think the winner of that fight is probably the next person that's going to be in line for the title shot. Another fight to kind of keep in mind is the Manny Gamburi versus Rafael Asuncao. I think the winner of that fight is going to put themselves right back in the picture. And I think they're still a couple fights away. Maybe whoever wins that, if they can get another big name opponent and beat them, they can possibly get a title shot. Griffin, he's done a lot of damage to himself by losing 3 of his last 5 in the lightweight division, so I think he's definitely a couple wins away from even being considered for a title shot. So that's pretty much how it's breaking down. I think it's going to be an interesting division now that those 2 guys has dropped down. There's been a few other guys, lesser named guys, drop down, so I think it's going to be kind of interesting now. They were running out of people there for a while. Now they got a good stock again, so it's going to be interesting. Until next time, guys, tune in.